Well, here we are again, starting with the heart of every great sourdough loaf. We're talking about the starter. If you're new to this channel, welcome. I'm Alan, and today I'm going to show you exactly how to create a sourdough starter from scratch. We'll go step by step through the entire process, making it simple and easy to follow. And if you've been following my sourdough adventures for a while, don't skip this one. Sometimes it's helpful to go back to the basics. You might pick up a new tip. You might discover a better technique. You might find something that helps improve your everyday baking. So, grab your flour, grab your water, and let's build a healthy, active sourdough starter together from the very beginning. First of all, I want to make sure you understand that there are differences in yeasts. What's the difference between sourdough starter and commercial yeast? But before we start, let's answer an important question. That question is, what exactly is a sourdough starter? Well, simply put, a sourdough starter is a natural yeast culture. In fact, it's the oldest form of yeast used for bread making. You see, long before commercial yeast was sold in packets at grocery stores, bakers were using sourdough starters to make bread. Most of us are familiar with commercial yeast, the dry or the fresh yeast you can buy at the supermarket. There's nothing wrong with commercial yeast. It works well and has helped millions of people bake bread at home. The biggest difference between the two is speed. Commercial yeast is designed to work fast, sometimes very, very fast. It helps dough rise quickly, which allows bread to be baked and sold faster. That's one reason commercial yeast became so popular in bakeries around the world. Sourdough starter, on the other hand, is naturally slow. It can take 4 to 6 times longer than commercial yeast to ferment dough. That may sound like a disadvantage, but it's actually one of its greatest strengths. The longer fermentation gives the dough more time to develop flavor. As the dough slowly rises, complex flavors begin to form that simply can't be rushed. That's why many people describe sourdough bread as having a richer, deeper taste than bread made with commercial yeast. When bread is fermented very quickly, it often lacks some of that flavor development. Again, there's nothing wrong with commercial yeast, but speed can sometimes come at the expense of taste. Another difference is right in the name, sourdough. During the long fermentation process, natural acids develop in the dough. These acids give sourdough its distinctive tangy flavor and aroma. So when you compare the two, it really comes down to this. Commercial yeast is fast and it's convenient. Sourdough starter is slower, but it rewards patience with incredible flavor, aroma, and character. That's exactly why so many bakers, including me, love working with sourdough. Now we're going to answer why this sourdough starter method is so simple. The best part about making a sourdough starter is that it's really, really simple. You only need 4 things. Number 1 is flour. Number 2 is water. Number 3 is a jar. Number 4 is a spoon or spatula. That's it. You may have seen other recipes online or in books that use exact measurements like equal parts flour and water, such as 100 grams of flour to 100 grams of water, or 1 cup of flour to 1 cup of water. That method does work, but today I want to show you my approach to making a starter by eye. Yes, I said by eye. I learned this method from watching videos by a man who calls himself Gluten Morgan on YouTube. And it is so very simple. And by the way, you can look up Gluten Morgan and you can learn so much from him if you decide to watch some of his programs. Now listen, with this method, there's no scale, there's no measuring cups, and there's no complicated math. The goal is texture, not numbers. What matters most is the texture of the mixture. We're aiming for something creamy and smooth, almost like a thick mousse or a very thick pancake batter. You don't want it too dry, and you do not want it too runny. Just thick enough to hold a little structure while still being easy to stir. Also, different flours absorb water differently. Some flours drink up a lot of water and they become stiff quickly. Others absorb less and turn into a loose, watery batter. That's why strict measurements don't always give the same result. Why does a thicker starter help beginners? It's pretty simple. A wetter starter ferments faster. That sounds good, but if you're just starting out, the rapid activity can make it harder to understand what's happening. The starter may rise and fall very quickly. It may overflow, or it may become messy before you know how to manage it. A slightly thicker starter ferments more slowly. That slower pace gives you time to observe the bubbles, the rise, and the smell changes as the culture develops. It's easy to learn, and it's easier to control. So I'm going to give you the simple rule for doing this. Here it is. Instead of measuring exact amounts, add flour and water gradually until you reach that creamy, mousse-like texture. Stir it well, and you're done. That's the method we'll use throughout this video. Trust your eyes. Aim for the right texture and let the starter develop naturally. Now it's day one, and we're going to be starting our sourdough starter. Let's get started. The first step is incredibly simple. I have a basic jar that I picked up at Dollar Tree. You see, you do not need anything fancy. A glass jar works great, but you can also use a plastic jar or even a metal container if that's what you have. You'll also need a loose-fitting lid or cover. It does not need to be airtight, just something to keep dust and debris out of the jar. Now, the starter itself. Now let's look at our jar. You can see it's got a lid on it with a button top. And that button top is to seal the jar. You push it down and the jar is sealed. But we don't want the jar sealed, so we're going to release it. We've got a piece of tape on top of the button to show that we're recording this on 6/11/26. So that's the day the starter is being made. We also have a rubber band on it so that we know where the starter is, where the top of the starter's at. So we can keep track with how high it's going. Now I'm going to add 2 heaping spoonfuls of bread flour to the jar. And let's do it right here. 1, 2. Next, I'm adding some water, and you can use lukewarm water, or if you want it to proceed a little bit faster, you want to warm up your water, but no hotter than about 90 degrees. A little more water. Still a little bit too thick here. You can see how it is. It's just a little bit too thick to work with. Again, we're doing this by sight. And I believe that this is working out just about right now. That's almost perfect. It's just a little bit damper than what I usually have it, but that's fine. So you can see it there. See how it flows off? That's just about a little bit thicker than I think I'll just add a little bit more flour to it now, because I want it a little bit thicker than that. There we go. See how it hangs onto the spatula, then slowly drips off. That's just about perfect. Do want to scrape the sides down a little bit. Next, we need to move our rubber band down to where the new starter is. Now remember, this is just flour and water. But we want it right at the top of where the mixture is. That's about right there. And we're going to put the lid on it. And we'll leave it sitting on the counter. Why bread flour? Because bread flour contains plenty of starches and plenty of protein. You need a high protein flour, at least 12.7 grams of protein. Now, those starches we're talking about are important because they become food for the microorganisms that will create our sourdough starter. The two main groups of microorganisms are wild yeast and beneficial bacteria, often called lactobacilli. As soon as we add water, these microorganisms wake up and they begin feeding on the starches in the flour. That's why flour choice matters. Wheat flour works very well. Spelt flour works well. Rice flour can also work, although it does not contain gluten. Today we're making a traditional sourdough starter with gluten. So bread flour is my personal choice. One flour that won't work by itself is almond flour. Almond flour contains very little starch, so it doesn't provide the food these microorganisms need to grow and thrive. You can use all-purpose flour in the starter, but you really do not want to use it in your bread when you start baking the bread. But again, I personally use bread flour even in my starter. So now we have our flour in the jar. What kind of water do we want to use? Well, just regular tap water from my kitchen sink is what I use. The only thing you want to avoid is heavily chlorinated water. If your tap water contains chlorine, simply pour it into a container and let it sit uncovered for about 24 hours before using it. Most of the chlorine will dissipate naturally if you do that. If you prefer bottled water, that's fine too. The important thing is that it's clean drinking water, and I specify drinking water because you do not want to use distilled water. All the minerals are taken out of distilled water. Use spring water, so you have all the natural minerals in it. Now, it shouldn't be runny like pancake batter, and it shouldn't be stiff like dough. Think of something similar to a thick pancake batter or mousse. If your mixture is too thin, add a little more flour. If it's too thick, add a little more water. That's why I like making a starter by eye. There's no need to weigh or measure everything perfectly. Just focus on achieving the right texture. And remember, we don't need a huge amount of starter right now. This small mixture is all we need to begin. At this point, the life of our sourdough starter is beginning. The wild yeast and beneficial bacteria are already present in the flour. They've been dormant, they've been waiting for moisture and food. Once we add water, they wake up and they begin feeding on the starches. The fermentation process starts slowly, but it has begun. Now, developing a sourdough starter takes time. Most starters take at least 5 days to become active. Some may take 7 or even 10 or more days, depending on the conditions. Now, there are 2 keys to success. First key is regular feeding. Each day we'll feed the starter with fresh flour and water. The same flour you plan to use for baking bread is perfectly fine. Second is the temperature. Temperature plays a huge role in how quickly your starter develops. The ideal temperature is around 77 degrees Fahrenheit, or if you like Celsius, you want your temperature to be about 25 degrees Celsius where you're growing your starter. If your kitchen is much colder than that, the process will slow down considerably. The microorganisms will still work, but they'll do so much more slowly. On the other hand, if it is extremely hot, fermentation can move too quickly and create other problems. So, try to keep your starter in a comfortable spot where the temperature stays close to 77 degrees Fahrenheit. For many people, a kitchen counter works perfectly. Now, our work for today is finished. We've mixed our flour and water. We've created the right texture, and we've started the fermentation process. All we need now is patience. Leave the jar on the counter for the next 24 hours, and tomorrow we'll come back to see what's happening inside our brand new sourdough starter. I'll see you on day 2. Continue watching. All right, it's been 24 hours since we mixed our starter together. What do you say we take a look at it? I've got it right here beside me. Here it is. It hasn't done much of anything. It does have a few bubbles in it, which you probably can't see on the camera. It doesn't smell a whole lot different than what it did. Flour and water smells like flour and water. So nothing exciting as far as signs of what's happening. Still looks very much like flour and water mixed together. The smell pretty much the same, just fresh flour and water. But don't worry. You see, this is completely normal for the first 24 hours. We are only on day 2, and the process has just begun. Even though we can't see much happening, the microorganisms are waking up and getting established. Good things are happening beneath the surface. So, what do we do today? Pretty simple. We feed it. Just like yesterday, I'm adding 2 heaping spoonfuls of flour and a little water. Remember, we're still doing everything by eye, no scales, no measuring cups, just watching the texture. One, 2. Let's add a little bit of water. And let's mix it. Just trying to make sure I get all the flour mixed up. We don't want any dry flour sitting in there. And it looks like we need to add a little bit more water. See if I can let you see a little bit of what I'm doing here. So I think that's about it for today as far as mixing here. See if I can scrape it down a little bit where I messed up the jar. Remember, no scales, no measuring cups, just watching the texture. As always, we're looking for that thick, creamy consistency, not too wet, not too dry. If the mixture becomes too runny, simply add a little more flour. If it becomes too thick, add a splash of water. The goal is the same texture we've been aiming for from the beginning. A smooth, creamy mixture that stirs easily, but is not watery. This looks just right. So now what? Nothing but more patience. The wild yeast and beneficial bacteria are still getting established. Think of it like they're introducing themselves and learning how to work together. Over the next few days, they'll begin multiplying, growing stronger, and creating the fermentation that turns this simple mixture into a healthy sourdough starter. For now, our job is easy. Feed it. Keep it at a comfortable temperature and give it time. We'll leave it on the counter for another 24 hours and come back tomorrow to see what changes. I'll see you on day 3. Good morning. It's now been about 48 hours since we started our sourdough starter. And we've fed it now for the last 2 days. Let's see what's happening. Take a look at this. We're starting to see a few bubbles along the sides, which I doubt the camera picks up, and near the bottom of the jar. That's exciting. It may not look like the smell has changed a little bit too. It no longer smells like plain flour and water. That's another good sign. What is happening? Well, the wild yeast and beneficial bacteria are beginning to wake up and get to work. As they feed on the starches in the flour, they produce gases, and those gases create the bubbles we're starting to see. So is our starter ready to bake bread now? Not yet. We're definitely moving in the right direction, but the starter still needs more time to grow stronger and develop a healthy population of yeast and bacteria. For now, we'll continue doing exactly what we've been doing with a minor change. We are working with a small amount of starter, but I do need to discard some of this starter at this time. You may not need to though, because everyone's environment is a little bit different. Our starter here is pretty high, so we need to get rid of some of it. Nice and gooey. And we won't scrape it down until we mix everything. Now I'm going to add another 2 heaping spoonfuls of flour. 1, 2. And of course we need to add a little bit of water. Then we'll mix everything together thoroughly. Remember, we're doing this by eye, and it's entirely too dry yet. I haven't added enough water. Just a little bit. So we don't want to overwater it. And I did get a little bit too much water in it, so I do need to add a little bit more flour. And still add a little bit more. But as you see, we need to be very careful adding our ingredients, or we need to go back and forth for a while, just like I'm doing. Still not enough flour. Looks like we may have it this time. Always remember, we're doing this by eye, and we want to see a certain consistency in what we're doing. There we go. That's pretty close to what we're wanting. Yeah, it's hanging on to the spoon. Remember, we're looking for that thick, creamy texture That's the goal every time we feed the starter. Remember, texture is more important than exact measurements. If the mixture looks too runny, add a little more flour. If it seems too dry or stiff, add a little more water. And don't forget about temperature. Keeping your starter close to 77 degrees Fahrenheit, or the equivalent is 25 degrees Celsius, will help it develop at a steady pace. Now, once again, take a look at the texture. So nice, thick and creamy. That's exactly what we're after. Now we want to be sure and scrape down the sides. And that's very important, because if it stays on the sides, there's always a chance of something going wrong and developing more than just our yeast. So we want to make sure we get that scraped down real good. A little bit more. And we need to reposition our rubber band so we know where it starts at. That's pretty much it. We'll put the lid on it, and we'll leave it on the shelf for another 24 hours. Or I should say countertop, for another 24 hours. So, day 3 is complete. We've seen our first signs of activity. We've fed the starter again, and now it's time for a little more patience. Let's leave it for another 24 hours and see what tomorrow brings. Well, that's all for today. We've made great progress on our sourdough starter, and it's already beginning to show signs of life. Remember, making a great sourdough starter takes patience, consistency, and a little bit of time. Keep feeding it, keep watching it, and before long, you'll have a healthy starter ready to bake amazing bread. I'll see you on day 4, where we'll continue building an effective sourdough starter. Welcome back to day 4 of our sourdough starter. Let's take a look at our sourdough starter. Well, it doesn't look very good. It's only raised a little bit. There's just a few bubbles in it. Not much activity at all. We've been doing everything right. We've been feeding the starter every day. We've been keeping it at a good temperature, and we've been maintaining that creamy texture. And there's just a few bubbles, and it's only grown just a little bit. I'll talk about this more. It's doing something. It's got a good smell to it, a good sourdough smell. And if you've been working on your starter with us quite different than it did on day one. That's completely normal. A healthy sourdough starter can smell like yogurt, cheese, or beer, cereal, or even fruit. You see, fermentation creates all kinds of interesting aromas. So if your starter smells a little unusual, don't panic. As long as it doesn't have visible mold or a truly foul smell, you're probably right on track. Now, here's something important. Around day 4, many starters slow down their growth for a while. In fact, my original starter did exactly that. This starter has done the same thing. So please understand, this is very common and there's nothing to worry about. The solution to this apparent problem is very, very simple. Keep feeding it, keep discarding when it needs it, and keep being patient. You see, the microorganisms are still developing, and the starter is building strength, even if it doesn't seem very active for a day or two. You don't necessarily have to discard on day 4. I won't be discarding. You only discard if your starter has filled up your jar. Others may wait until day 5. The important thing is to discard when the jar starts filling up. That's the important thing. You discard when the jar starts filling up. Now, discard helps refresh the starter and gives the microorganisms a fresh supply of food. Think of it as cleaning out the old and making room for the new growth. And what about the discard? Don't be fooled by the name. You don't have to throw it away if you don't want to. You can use it to make pancakes, you can make waffles, you can make crackers, and there are many, many other recipes. All you have to do is get on the internet. There are plenty of ideas online for using sourdough discard. Now let's refresh our starter. You get it opened up, get the flour opened up, and instead of 2 heaping spoonfuls of flour, we're going to put 3 in today. 1, 2, 3. The reason I added 3 spoonfuls instead of 2 is to give it an extra jump start since it wasn't rising properly. So we put in the 3. Now we want to add a little bit of water. Making sure we get all the sides scraped with flour, making sure all the flour gets mixed in. See how it looks? As always, we're doing this by eye. Then we mix everything together thoroughly. And what are we looking for? That same thick, creamy texture we've been aiming for from the beginning. Not too wet, not too dry. Just smooth, creamy, and easy to stir. Take a look at it now. Isn't that wonderful? Okay, we want to scrape our spatula down. Then we need to scrape the walls of the jar down. best we can. Move our rubber band up to match the starter, so we know where it starts at. There we go. Put our lid back on. So our day 4 feeding is now complete. Now all we need is another 24 hours. I'll see you tomorrow for day 5. Please keep watching this video for day 5. Now all we need is another 24 hours. I'll see you tomorrow for day 5. Please keep watching this video for day 5. Welcome back to day 5 of our sourdough starter journey. Let's see how our starter is doing today. It's grown a little bit. There's a few bubbles. But wow. First thing I really notice is the smell. It smells really nice now. There's a slight tanginess to it, but at the same time, I pick up aromas that remind me of cereal, yogurt, and maybe even a little bit of vanilla. It has that fresh, fermented smell that tells us the microorganisms are healthy and active. The wild yeast and beneficial bacteria seem to be thriving, and our starter is becoming stronger every day. We're getting very close now. For some people, a starter may be ready in around day 5. For others, it may take 7 days or even 10 days. You see, it all depends on several factors, including the temperature in your home, the type of flour you're using, and even the specific microorganisms that happen to be present in your environment. Every starter is a little bit different. That's one of the things that makes sourdough so interesting. Part of the journey is learning how your own starter behaves and develops every time. This one here, it's starting to look beautiful. It's not there yet, but it's doing something and will soon be ready. So what do we do today? The same thing we've been doing all along. We feed it again. You remember it didn't grow a whole lot. We want to make sure all those little microbes have plenty to eat. I'll add 3 more teaspoons, it's not teaspoons, but 3 more spoons of flour. 1, 2, 3. Then a little water. And stir. We want to be sure we get everything mixed together while watching the texture. And again, we did not need to discard because the jar's not full. Remember, we're not focused on an exact measurement. We're focused on consistency. We're looking for that thick, creamy texture, smooth, easy to stir, and not too wet or too dry. Take a look. Perfect. That's exactly what we want. Make sure we get the flour all stirred up. I love the way that looks. Scrape our spatula down. And then scrape the sides of our jar down. What a beautiful sight we have there. We do want to put the rubber band up to where it's going to start at. And I actually would not be surprised if this overflows during the night. So I'll be sure and put a saucer under it just in case. It's exactly what we want. A nice creamy starter that holds its shape while still being easy to mix. Everything looks healthy and fine. So now I've already put the lid back on. And we're going to let it rest for another 24 hours. We're getting very close to having a mature sourdough starter. I'll see you tomorrow for day 6. Just keep the video running. Well, it is day 6. We need to check and see what our starter looks like. And picking it up, we can see that it has grown quite a bit. In fact, it went up higher than what it is right now and come back down. So it's not quite ready, but almost. This is actually what a healthy, active sourdough starter should look like. It just needs to grow a little bit more before we use it to bake bread. It's full of bubbles, it's full of air, and it's absolutely alive with activity. And it has that pleasant sourdough aroma that tells us the wild yeast and beneficial bacteria are thriving. This starter we have here today is almost ready to bake bread. One more discard and feeding should take care of it. Well, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, one more discard, one more feed should bring our starter to the place that it needs to be. If you look at this right here, it didn't quite double in size. Even though it's got plenty of bubbles inside, around the side, and on the bottom, there's plenty of bubbles. But it just didn't quite make it to where it needed to be. So, let's feed it again. First thing we want to do before we feed it is a discard. We need to make sure we have plenty of room for it to grow. Now we'll take our flour and we'll give it 3 heaping spoonfuls again. 1, 2, 3. Now we're going to add a little bit of water to it. And as always, we're mixing everything together while watching the texture. Remember, we're not focused on exact measurements. We're focused on consistency and texture. We're looking for that thick, creamy texture, smooth, easy to stir, and not too wet and not too dry. So let's give it a good stirring. We want to make sure we get all the flour mixed up. We don't want any raw flour in our starter. Look at that. Beautiful. We could add just a little bit more flour, and I think we'll do that. That looks really nice. So take a close look here. It's clinging to the spatula, but it's still coming off. That's perfect. That's exactly what we want. A nice creamy starter that holds its shape while still being easy to mix. Everything looks healthy and active. Now we need to scrape our spatula down. And clean off the sides of our jar. And there we are. Now put the lid back on. And we're going to let it rest for another 24 hours. Almost forgot we want to adjust the rubber band so we know where it started out, because tomorrow it should have grown real good and be ready to bake bread. You almost got the rubber band where it needs to be. There we go. And we'll store it on the shelf in a nice warm spot and let it rest for the next 24 hours. And we'll look, but it should be perfect on day 7. We're getting very close to having a mature sourdough starter. I'll see you tomorrow for day 7. Be sure to keep your video running for day 7. Take a look at this. It grew so much that it actually overflowed. And it's nice. Boy, is it nice. This is what a healthy sourdough starter should look like. It's full of bubbles. It's full of air. And it's absolutely alive with activity. And again, it literally popped the top of the jar off. Wish I could show you the texture, but it's just from where we're filming, it's nearly impossible to show you the texture. But it is creamy, it is light, it is soft, and it is filled with tiny bubbles throughout the jar. It's almost like a thick mousse. And the smell, well, the smell is incredible. It has that pleasant sourdough aroma that tells us the wild yeast and beneficial bacteria are thriving. This starter is ready to bake with. That's right, this is ready to bake with right now. Some starters are ready in 5 days, while others may take 7, like this one has, 8, or even 10 days. You see, every home is different. Every climate is different. And every flour behaves a little bit differently. That's why the 2 most important ingredients for a sourdough starter is patience and consistency. Keep feeding your starter every day and try to maintain a temperature close to 77 degrees Fahrenheit or 25 degrees centigrade, whichever one you prefer to use. If you do that, your starter will eventually become active. It will become strong enough to bake bread. Now, we have a healthy sourdough starter. The next question is, how do you keep your starter alive? Let's talk about maintaining your starter. If you're baking bread every day, keeping your starter, well, I'm getting so tongue-tied today, keeping your starter healthy is simple. If you're baking bread every day, you use some of the starter for baking, then you feed what's left with fresh flour and water. That's all there is to it. Use it, feed it. Use it, feed it. As long as you continue feeding it regularly and keeping it at a comfortable room temperature, your starter can stay active for years. But what if you don't bake every day? Like, I don't bake every day. I bake once a week. What do you do then? Most people don't bake every day. And if that's your case, you don't want your starter growing into a giant container that requires daily feeding. Just isn't practical. The easiest solution is to store it in the refrigerator. That's right. This starter is going to be stored in the refrigerator. Remember how important temperature is? Lower temperatures, slow fermentation. You need to remember that. Lower temperatures, slow fermentation. When you place your starter in the fridge, the yeast and bacteria become much less active, which means you won't need to feed it near as often. This makes long-term maintenance much, much easier. But then you've got another problem. You need to bring a refrigerated starter back to life when you want to use it. Question is, how do you do that? Same way I do it each and every week. When you're ready to bake again, simply remove the starter from the refrigerator and bring it back to room temperature. Once it's at room temperature, then you feed it with fresh flour and water. Depending on how long it has been in the refrigerator, it may take a few hours, it may take a full day, it may even take a couple of days to become fully active. What I do, since I bake once a week, is the evening before I'm ready to bake, I take it out and let it sit all night long to warm up. And then I feed it. Now, if necessary, I will discard some of it and then feed it. And then when it grows up, like this one has, hopefully yours won't overflow like this one did, but that's okay, it doesn't hurt. When it grows up and is mature, then you can use it to bake with. So, looking at it again, if your starter has been sitting in the refrigerator for quite a while, I recommend discarding a portion before feeding it. Discard some of the old starter, then add fresh flour and water. This refreshes the culture. It strengthens the yeast population, and it helps restore healthy fermentation activity. Now, how do you know when it's ready? This is one of the most important questions. How do you know when your starter is ready to bake with? Listen closely. It's pretty simple. A healthy starter should double or even triple in size after the feeding. That's why I put the rubber band on it, where the level starts out. And when it doubles or triples that amount of starter, then it's ready to use. Now, depending on the temperature, the strength of the starter, and how much you have fed it, this may happen in as little as a few hours, or it may take longer. When your starter rises significantly, becomes light and airy, and is filled with bubbles throughout, that's a great sign that it's ready. Here's what you're looking for. You're looking for lots of bubbles. There'll be bubbles up and down the sides, there'll be bubbles on the bottom, and when you open it up, there'll be bubbles all over the top of it. You'll have a creamy consistency. It'll have a light and airy structure. And of course, it will have that pleasant sourdough aroma that I wish you could smell through this video, but you can't. When your starter looks like this and has doubled or tripled in volume, after feeding, it's ready to help you bake amazing sourdough bread. And that's it. You've successfully created your own sourdough starter from scratch. Now it's time to put it to work and start baking. Now, if you've been following along and doing the same thing as me every day, if yours hasn't reached where it's doubled or tripled in size, then discard and feed it again. Keep doing that daily, until all of a sudden you will see this grow and grow and grow. Well, that's it for today's sourdough adventure. You've now learned how to create a sourdough starter from scratch using just flour, water, a jar, and a little bit of patience. If you've been following along, your starter should be well on its way to becoming a healthy, active culture that's ready to bake amazing bread. Next Saturday at 4 p.m., I'll be sharing the simple sourdough bread recipe that I use each and every week. I'll show you exactly how I take an active starter and turn it into a beautiful loaf of homemade sourdough bread. You won't want to miss next Saturday's program. If this video has helped you, please take a moment to subscribe to this channel. Give this video a thumbs up and share your thoughts or questions in the comments down below. I'd really love to hear from you. Tell me how your starter is doing and where you are in your sourdough journey. If you're having problems with getting your starter going, let me know and I'll do what I can to help you out. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, happy baking and God bless.